Shalom and welcome, welcome to Messianic Delaware. My name is Jerry Mitchell, and today I have something really, I hope, kind of special for you. We're going to look at what is the perfect family, or honoring our father and our mother. And as we look at that today, we're going to jump right in because this is something that I've been wanting to do, like a lot of things. I finally got to it. Looking at exactly what we're wanting to see, what we're grasping at as we are in search of the perfect family and how we honor our father and our mother that our days may be long with us. What is our idea today of the perfect family? Now, think about this. Think about I know that the age group I should say that most of the age group that listens to these particular teachings is a little bit older, not offending to the youngers. But think about this. Let me show you something here. I'm going to go through just a couple of pictures. Is this the idea we have? If we look at the perfect family, we have mom, dad, maybe two brothers, and everything in their life might not go perfect, but you know what? At the end of the day, it was all good. It was all cheery. It was all happy. Okay? What about this one? Is this, mom, dad, the boy and his dog? What could be more American? What could be more pure? What could be more perfect than this particular family? Timmy might not have done everything, but Lassie was always getting him out of trouble, right? He was learning, he was growing, he was experiencing things. Okay, now here's a tricky one. What about these guys? I remember, watching this. I don't remember exactly when it ended, but I remember watching this. By the time I was old enough to remember it, Adam was no longer in the picture. It was just, Ben and Hoss and Little Joe. Mom was out of the picture on this show, though, right? How and the way that they were honoring her was by doing what? Trying to live the best life they could in a rough situation, right? All right, now here's another tricky one. Many of you know this particular show. We grew up watching Zorro and Lassie's mother run this family in outer space, and instead of a boy and a dog, it was a boy and a robot. Of course, we had the antagonist and some other things going on there. But is this the concept we get where everything happens and and at the end of the day, it's all good? Is that what we're looking for? Is that what we've been trained to think? Now, let's look at some family dynamics for a moment. And we need to ask some questions. If we look in the Bible, does the Bible show us what the perfect family should look like? And we're going to look at this. Does the Bible take into account for dysfunctional families as we understand them today? Now, this term dysfunctional family is very broad. It's very inclusive of a lot of things, right? And here's the real question that we want to look at. Do we today have unobtainable family expectations? Do we expect more from our families than what we are humanly able to deliver? Let me say that again. Do we expect more from our families than we are all humanly able to deliver? And as we go through these, I want you to remember these questions because we're going to answer them as we go through this. And this, I really hope you find this as fascinating as I did when I started looking at family, because the history of the family, it's a neat thing. Family as we know it today is not what is described in the Bible, not at all. We consider a family unit as being limited today. I mean, we have parents, children, sometimes grandchildren. Sometimes they live in the same house, sometimes they don't. All right? That is just our culture today, and it has developed, and we're going to look at that just a little bit. Now, in 1828, Webster defined family as the collective body of persons who live in one house and under one head or manager. A household, including parents, children, and servants, and as the case may be, lodgers or boarders. So as maybe even more people come into the house. Now think about this. This is 1828. And Webster says the family included your servants. Now we all know, and I'm not going to get into this, but we all know that slavery in the United States, especially on the southern plantations, we all know what happened there, right? But in 1828, because Webster gets his definitions from the Bible, he's excuse me, he's telling us that that servants, slaves, should be treated as family. And you know, we can get into whether some of them were or weren't, because you know, some, let's face it, sometimes we don't treat our family as good as we should. All right, but what I want to say, what I want to look at here is, because Webster gets his definitions out of the Scripture, servants are to be treated as family. Now he used the word household. And a household is those who dwell under the same roof and compose a family. Those who belong to a family. It's also defined as belonging to the house and family. So, you know, this could include some things as lowly as furniture, you know, maybe pets, maybe livestock, that kind of thing, if it was good enough to be considered that at the time. Now, if we look at Genesis 7:1, Lord said to Noah, "Come you and all your house into the ark, for you I have seen righteous before me in this generation." Now, that's King James. Now, other translations use household or family instead of house. And I want you to think about this. Noah was able to honor his mother and his father because of one major thing. And it's contained in this verse. Noah was able to honor his mother and his father in a really, really exceptional way. For I have seen you as righteous. Noah, I know you are a man who is looking to find my heart, says our Creator. And if you are seeking God with all of your heart and all of your soul and all of your mind, that right there is honoring your parents. And I want to get into a little bit more of that, but that verse right there is the heart of why and how we are able to honor our parents. More on that later. If we look at Genesis chapter 4, now I'm not going to read this. I'm not going to take the time to read Genesis chapter 4. I'm just going to tell you. If we look at Genesis chapter 4, is it the perfect family? Well, only if murder is acceptable, because in Genesis chapter 4, what happens? Cain kills Abel. I want you to think about this. We look at Adam and Eve and the first family for reference, not for example. We look at them for reference and not for example, unless we choose to follow the example of sin. Because let's face it, the whole story of Adam and Eve is you start in perfection, you mess up. It's basically a story of what not to do. You don't not listen to God. You listen to what He says. You do what He says. You don't kill your siblings. You know, it's the perfect example of what not to do. Hate to say it that way, but that's the way it is. Look at Genesis 17:2. Excuse me. And I'm sorry for a little bit of cough here, folks. Let me take a sideline. I'm getting over some things, and just please bear with me a little bit. Genesis 17:2. And he that is 8 days old shall be circumcised among you, every man child in your generations, he that is born in the house or bought with money of any stranger, which is not of your seed. Now this is consistent with Exodus 12, where it reads, one law will be for you, the homeborn, and for the sojourner among you, the strangers that come to live with you. It's inclusive. Anything that comes into your house, it's that entire inclusive concept that brings people into a covenant relationship with their Creator. Okay? And again, we see that the use of the word house or household here implies everybody. It's everybody who lives or works under the head of the group. If you come to that, it is another way that our Creator chooses to bring you into this covenant relationship with Him. And He starts you out at 8 days old, and He says, "Look, anybody who's 8 days old or older, you're going. If it's a male, they get circumcised. That begins this journey. That is how they begin this journey at this particular point in time. Later on, we know it's a little bit different. Kind of. Okay. Later on, you actually get to believe first, and then you do the other things. Genesis 14:14. When Abram heard that his brother was taken, he armed his trained servants, born in his house, 318 of them, and he pursued them unto Dan. Look at the word servant here. If you look at Strong's, it's going to be number 3211. The word is yalid. Guess what? I love this. This just has so many lessons built into this verse. The definition of yalad is descendants who are born, children, homeborn, who are born, who is born, who were born. It's conjugated many different ways. But the thing is, one of the lessons we get here is this is how you treat your employees. You treat them as your descendants. You are responsible for them. Okay, that is the perfect employer-employee relationship. Thankfully, I was able to work for some folks like this a couple of different times. I've been blessed when it comes to employers. I've also been cursed when it comes to a couple of different employers. But this, I really learned, because sometimes you are fortunate enough to run across somebody that you're going to work for that's going to treat you just like family. They're going to treat you just like family, and it comes from here. It comes from here. Okay? But you look at your servants, you look at your whole household, you look at everybody you are responsible for, and you treat them equally. Again, getting back to the concept of what Webster was defining. And he included servants in 1828. Even in it was kind of the beginning of the worst part of slavery in America. Okay? The early 1800s, when they were really hammering that concept of free labor, and to use the term disposable labor in the Deep South, those folks down there really were not living according to the way they were designed to live. Let's just put it that way. They just weren't living as God created them to live. But both Noah and Abraham were considered righteous, but their families were far from what we consider perfect today. Right? We use them for reference, not for example. Was Abraham's family was absolutely not perfect. Noah, look what happened to Noah. He gets off the ark, and in just a very, very short time, comparatively, it took some years to plant a vineyard. It took some time to make wine. It took some time for that to happen. Noah winds up celebrating a little bit too much. He gets drunk. He's in his tent. Ham goes in. Something happens. We know that something happens, and there's a lot of speculation about this. But something happens. Now Noah can't have children. So he curses who? The fourth son of Ham. Noah can't have a fourth son. Remember, the commandment was even to Noah to go forth and multiply. Noah didn't have a fourth son. He didn't multiply. He couldn't for some reason. And the speculation is that Ham did something to Noah while he was drunk in his tent, which is why Shem and Japheth go in and cover him up and comfort the father. So here we go. Far from perfect. Far, far from perfect. We use them for reference. We look at their reference not to be examples of what we follow. Let's look at 1 Samuel 16 and 11. Samuel asked Jesse, "Are these all the sons you have?" Jesse answered, "I still have the youngest. He's out taking care of the sheep." Samuel said, "Well, send for him, because we're not going to sit down till he arrives." Now, let me say this. Jesse did not understand the value of his youngest son. Now, being the youngest son, I can kind of relate to this just a little bit. He's treated a little bit as an afterthought. David, as the youngest, he's going to receive the least of the inheritance. The least of the amount of the birthright. He treated Jesse treated him kind of like we consider slaves today. He was just, David, he's just out taking care of the sheep. Why do you want to be bothered with him? He's the youngest. What do you care about David? Who cares? But let's turn this around. Let's find out how David thinks of his father. 1 Samuel 17:58. Saul speaks to David now. And he says, "Whose son are you, young man?" David said, "I am the son of your servant Jesse the Bethlehemite." Literally, I am the son of your servant Jesse from the house of bread. Folks, I could go a long time just on what David says here. Okay? This is an entirely, this is a concept y'all need to study. Y'all need to look into this. You need to dive into it, and you need to figure out why this is important. Because he identifies him from the house of bread. Okay? He properly identifies his father very, very formally to Saul. Okay? He honors his father because he identifies his father so formally to Saul that there is no way that Saul doesn't know who this man is. He understands the tribes and the households among the tribes in his kingdom. Just a side note, servant used here is Strong's number 5650, abed. It is another, and it does actually mean servant. Not slave, servant. It's someone who serves. It's just another reason to check these definitions when you're reading in English. If there's any question, if there's anything that you think you need to even if you don't think you need to check it out, you need to check it out, because sometimes these translations, remember, they're edited by people. You've got to go get the real word for what these translations are. You've got to see it. You've got to understand it. You've got to know it. Done with that sideline. But just be aware, David absolutely honors his father very formally here in front of the king. And he says, "My father serves you, and he serves you because he is from the house of bread." Okay? Now, let's look at something really cool. Let's go to Luke 1:26 through 41, where the angel delivers the message to Mary and Joseph. Now, I'm not going to read this because I don't want to take the time to do it. I'm kind of bound for time when I do these here. You can read Luke 1:26 through 41, and we see that this messenger comes to Mary, says, "Mary, you're going to have a baby." Well, how can I have a baby? I haven't gone through the motions to have a child yet. Angel says, it's going to be okay. Don't you worry about a thing. Goes to Joseph and said, Joseph, Mary's going to have a baby. He's like, what? Now, in my modern mind, Joseph's saying, what you talking about, dude? Angel says, look, it's okay. Don't you worry about a thing. We're going to take care of this. It's all right. My paraphrase, my understanding. Read it for yourself. But I want you to think about something. Is this an example of a perfect family? Is this an example of the perfect family? We're talking about the birth of Yeshua here. What would the consequences be if this happened today? I can tell you what the consequences are when this happens today. I have very close personal experience when this happens today, when someone is born or actually conceived prior to marriage. And I can tell you, nothing has changed in the last 2,000 years. Absolutely nothing has changed in the last 2,000 years. See, even Yeshua does not meet the requirements for the perfect family as we think of it today. I want you to think about how many folks, how many children conceived prior to marriage are hated not by their parents, not by their grandparents, but they're hated by their community because we have this concept that they are the bastard child. We have this concept, and we get it from the church ladies, we get it from the deacons, we get it from all of these elders in these denominations, and they say, that ain't right. That's not how it's supposed to be. You can't do that. They condemn, they chastise. You know, show me where this is in Scripture. Show me where you are supposed to condemn life in Scripture. Show me where you're supposed to chastise life in Scripture. Show me where you're supposed to end life in Scripture because you don't think it's proper. You don't think it's right. And I'm going to get on a little bit more of that in just a second. But I want to tell you something, folks. Most denominational doctrine is that unwed mothers cannot take part in leadership of the church. Any type of leadership in the church. They can't teach Sunday school. They can't sing in the choir. I want to ask you something. If Peter says that Yeshua is our example, we're to do the things he did. We're to teach the things he taught. We're to live the life he lived. They are certainly not following the example of how Mary was treated, especially by her son. Remember in John 19, 26 and 27. Go read it. He looks down at Mary, and he wants to make sure that his mother is taken care of. He wants to make absolutely certain that this woman, who went through all of this condemnation, all of this chastisement, all of the humility that she was exposed to, he wants to make sure she's going to be taken care of. And he looks at John. And he looks at Mary. He says, woman, this is your son now. And he looks at John and he says, John, now she's your mother. You take care of her. He's making absolutely certain that Mary is being taken care of. Because each generation, each culture has its own concept of what the perfect family is. Basically because the culture today is far different. Far, far different. We look at things different. We see things differently. Out of necessity, sort of, because more people live in urban areas than in rural areas, we have this concept that each person needs to live in their own little box. And I mean that a lot of different ways. Each family lives in their own little house. They're disconnected from the extended household family type situation that we saw many years ago. This actually begins uh, throughout kind of the 15th, 16th, 17th century as people come into uh, the towns and they come into the protection of the castles and the protection of the larger landowners around them, especially in the European countries. Uh, this was actually done also in the Middle East as part of that European culture spread. So they come in and they, instead of being an entire household like we think of Abraham, that through his 318 servants all had families. Most of them had families. So you're looking at 318 families that Abraham's responsible for, and he says, you're all my family. When we get to the Middle Ages, we see these landowners, they're responsible now for protecting these people who are coming to them saying, I want your protection, and they're looking at them saying, well, you got to do something for me. But I'm going to treat you terrible. I'm not going to treat you like I treat my family. You're not going to get to sit at the big table. You're going to sit in squalor, and you're going to eat crumbs that fall off my table. Later, as this country settled, early in this country, we see huge households. We see parents, grandparents, great-grandparents when they live long enough, all living in large houses. They did, and it was kind of self-defeating, yes, because it was mostly agricultural. So these agricultural communities, had these huge families, and as these huge families, divvied out different portions of the land to different members of the family, we forced ourselves into moving into the urban areas. And it changed the concept of what we see as families today. And I started out with these pictures of these TV shows and these fictional families because I want you to think about something. We cannot allow someone else's opinion of what a perfect family is to determine how we should live and I'm sorry, let me start that over. I just blew that. We cannot allow someone else's opinion of what the perfect family is to determine how we should live. And we should live the way our Creator designed us to live. We should live the way our Creator designed us to live. How do we honor our parents today? How do we honor our parents today? Look at Noah's example. He honored his parents by being seen as righteous in the eyes of his Creator. Abraham honored his parents how? He was seen as righteous in the eyes of his Creator. Honoring your parents is sometimes difficult, especially when your parents choose to live a sinful lifestyle. But the best way to honor them is for you to leave that sinful lifestyle, for you to be seen as righteous in the eyes of our Creator. See, it's not our job to beat a parent or anyone else into accepting what our Creator offers. We can't do that. We can pray for them, but I guarantee you can't pray them into heaven. Ain't going to happen. They have to accept it. Other family members, you can pray for them, but guarantee you they are the ones who have to accept it. Can you honor your parents when they choose to live a sinful lifestyle? Yes, you can. How do you do that? You live the way the Creator designed you to live. You follow His instructions. You see, I can tell you with great certainty that there will not be a perfect family until we are completely restored and living in the New Jerusalem with our Creator as the head of our house. And He will treat each and every one of us exactly like family. He will do exactly what He promises us to do in the Bible. He will give us the blessings He chooses for us to have once we reach that point. And it is our job. It should be our job. That should be our desired destination. So what is the perfect family? It's not here. We can look at the Bible, but there is really no example in the Bible of the perfect family. Even Yeshua, even his family was not perfect. It was dysfunctional, as we would call it today. There will not be a perfect family until we are completely restored and living in the New Jerusalem. That is when we get to see the perfect family. That's when we'll be there. I want to thank you for joining me today here at Messianic Delaware. It has been my pleasure to bring this to you, and I certainly wish you have a blessed week.